Good evening. Tonight we travel to a time where the forecast doesn't come from satellites or sleek phone apps, but from something far creamier. You find yourself tucked away in a damp, stone-walled convent somewhere in the hills of 13th century Normandy. It's early morning. The bells haven't rung yet, but there's movement in the halls. Feet in worn leather slippers shuffle over flagstone floors. You sit up on a narrow straw mattress, cloaked in scratchy wool, nose twitching. There's a peculiar smell in the air, sharp, a little sour, definitely dairy. You pull on your cloak and trudge out into the corridor. A mist curls under the door ahead, as if the world outside hasn't fully woken. The air has that wet, heavy stillness just before a storm, or is it just always like this here? As you follow the scent through a creaking wooden door, you're met by a round-faced nun in a dark veil and thick apron. "Come," she says, her voice soft but purposeful. "It's nearly time." You probably won't survive this century, let's be honest. Between the fleas, the fasting, and the faintly cursed water supply, you're not exactly built for it. But for now, you're here, and you're about to witness something oddly comforting. And just a bit absurd. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. There are more informative yet soothing videos to come. Now let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sister Agnes leads you down a steep stone stairway into the convent's undercroft. It's darker than you expect, but not cold. The thick walls hold in a musky warmth, like old bread. The shelves around you sag under the weight of dozens of pale cheese wheels, their rinds cracked, sweating, some dusted in blue-green fuzz like mossy stones. This is the convent's aging cellar, but also, as it turns out, its forecasting chamber. The nuns don't exactly trust the sky. Clouds lie, winds change, but cheese reacts, cheese knows. You crouch beside one of the shelves and watch Sister Agnes gently press 2 fingers into the side of a wheel. "Feel that?" she asks. You nod, unsure what you're supposed to feel. They're watching for sweats, splits, and certain smells. Sister Clemence, who's been doing this since she was 11, says if the brie gives off a sour lanolin note, it means mist before nightfall. If it's ammonia forward, prepare for a thunderclap. "Only the strong cheeses speak clearly," she mutters. You wonder what the weak ones say, or scream. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine belief system or a clever mnemonic tool to remember seasonal patterns. But in this convent, it's taken seriously. You see Sister Jeanne recording something in a leather-bound book, noting both the cheese's state and the feeling in her left ankle. "Always acts up before the rain," she says without looking up. Above, the bell finally tolls. It's time for prime, the morning prayer. The sisters gather, chanting in low, gravelly Latin. You sit in the back, damp robe clinging to your knees, and notice several of them glancing up at the narrow windows. The sky is already dimming, though it's barely past sunrise. A storm could be coming, or maybe just a thick cloud bank rolling in from the west. You glance at the cheese notes in Jean's book. One wheel has begun to sweat early, another has collapsed slightly inward. The sisters murmur. Sister Clemence closes her eyes. By the end of the prayers, the atmosphere in the convent has shifted. The air's heavier. Everyone walks with a little more purpose. You're sent to the garden to collect herbs before the downpour begins. There you meet Sister Leonie, who doesn't believe in cheese prophecy at all. "I trust the carrots more," she whispers. "They twist when rain is near." She gives you a handful of mint and chuckles. Back in the undercroft, the nuns prepare waxcloth to wrap the more reactive cheeses. It's both preservation and ritual. Too much air and the cheese goes rancid. Too little and it can't do its work. A delicate balance like everything in this century. And then you hear it. The faintest rumble. It could be the thunder. Or perhaps just Sister Bernadette dragging a heavy cauldron in the kitchen. But the sisters exchange a glance. It's starting. Maybe. There's something strangely comforting in all of this. the quiet routine, the conviction, the mouldy wisdom of dairy. For a moment, as you settle onto the cool stone floor beside a wheel of unusually glossy, blue-veined cheddar, you think, maybe the cheese really does know something you don't. You stay close to the cheese sellers that afternoon, drawn in by the hushed murmurs and steady rhythms of the sisters' work. There's no ceremony, no dramatic unveiling, just this quiet, habitual consultation with the aging wheels, like checking a barometer shaped like a dinner plate. Sister Agnes gives you a smock that smells like whey and beeswax and tells you to help dry off the sweating ones. The cellar feels more alive now, as if the storm creeping across the hills has whispered some secret into the air and the cheese has heard it first. The camembert is the most reactive today. Its skin is thin, blistered in places, and every time someone lifts a cloth, there's a puff of scent so pungent it almost feels like it has intent. You're not sure what it's saying, but it's definitely saying something. Your job, apparently, is to flip the wheels. Carefully, slowly. Always clockwise, never counterclockwise. You ask why, and Sister Agnes shrugs, saying only, "We don't tempt fate." She's not joking. Each cheese type, you learn, has its specialty. The goat rounds bloom early in dry weather. The sheep's milk wheels are more temperamental, best for wind readings. The hard cow's cheese, though, that's for storms. Always the storms. One wheel is so dense and squat it looks like it could be used to anchor a boat. Sister Clemence refers to it as the fat one who groans. You do not ask follow-up questions. As the day goes on, the nuns chart everything. The sheen on the surface, the firmness of the rind, the color of mold as it creeps into new corners. Some take notes on parchment. Others just nod sagely and mutter things like, "It smells like last year's hail." You start to wonder if they remember every wheel that's come through here. It seems likely. And then, of course, there's the mold chart. It's pinned to a beam beside the shelf of oldest cheeses. A patchwork of colors and names, emerald fuzz, angel hair, ox-eye bloom, and your personal favorite, the creeping saint. According to Sister Berthe, a fuzzy pink blush on the northern side of a cheese is the clearest sign of morning drizzle. She taps one gently and inhales with the focus of a sommelier. "Tomorrow will be damp," she says with certainty. Now, does mold really predict the weather? Historians still argue whether this was an intentional reading of environmental clues or an elaborate way to mask the fact that cheese spoils differently depending on the humidity. In truth, it might have been both. After all, who better to notice the subtle changes in dairy than women who spend their lives making and aging it? There's an almost monastic calm to it, which is convenient because, well, they are monastics. But still, you begin to pick up the rhythm. Flip, sniff, check the sides, rotate again. One wheel hums slightly when you tap it. You chalk it up to echo, or maybe divine resonance. Hard to tell in here. Every few hours they take one wheel upstairs to sit beside the chapel door. It's not a relic. It's a test subject. Exposure to the open air lets them check for temperature sensitivity and odor changes. If the cheese begins to sweat heavily within 15 minutes, it usually means rain. If the surface splits or bulges, prepare for heavy winds. If it remains calm, they sing a hymn of thanks and return it to the cellar, tucking it in like a sleepy, mold-covered baby. Later that afternoon, you help Sister Matilda carry a tray of smaller wheels, test cheeses, she calls them, up to the cloister garden. The sun is trying to break through, but it's weak, golden and flickering. The breeze carries that metallic smell of oncoming rain. One wheel, a particularly stinky wedge called Brother Felix, begins to ooze after just 5 minutes. Sister Matilda makes a note and grins. We'll see thunder by vespers. The other nuns are less sure. Sister Leonie insists it's too warm for a real storm. "The cheeses are acting," she says, putting on drama, just like Sister Marguerite when she stubs her toe. You get the feeling cheese prediction is less an exact science and more like medieval jazz, improvised, interpretive, and extremely smelly. That evening, during the communal meal, mostly barley, pickled turnips, and a thin broth, You sit beside Sister Berta and ask whether the weather readings have ever gone horribly wrong. She pauses, sips her broth, and says, "There was the cheese that lied." Apparently, about 20 years ago, a wheel of semi-hard alpine cheese remained completely dry during a week of unusually damp weather. They trusted it, planned accordingly, hung linens, repaired the roof without haste. And then the downpour came. 2 straight days of cold, driving rain that soaked their manuscripts, flooded the herb garden, and caused their root cellar to sprout mushrooms. "It never looked guilty," she says, "not once." And yet, no one threw it out. In fact, they gave it a name, Saint Foolhardy. And it's still here, encased in wax, resting like a saint's toe bone in the far corner of the cellar. You'll pass it later on your way to evening prayers. It doesn't smell like much anymore, but the wax bears a faint thumbprint, possibly from the nun who forgave it, possibly from a mouse. There's something delightfully human about all this. A room full of deeply devout women quietly consulting with dairy products. They could have prayed for signs in the sky. And they probably do, now and then. But they also sniff brie, and maybe that's the balance. Holy and homemade. As the light fades and the first drops begin to spatter the windows, you're invited to join in the evening round, one final circuit through the cheese cellars before Compline. You shuffle through the rows, candle in hand, and pause beside the fat, silent wheel. It doesn't groan this time. It just sits, waiting. You press 2 fingers against its side, still warm, slightly sticky. It might rain harder tomorrow. You wake the next morning to the gentle plink of rain on the leaded glass panes. Not a storm exactly, more like a long, thoughtful drizzle. The kind that lingers over rooftops and fills every crevice with soft dampness. You lie there for a moment, wrapped in scratchy wool, vaguely aware that the cheese was right again. Down in the undercroft, the air feels heavier. The cheeses are practically humming with moisture. The sisters move more quietly today, as if the weather demands a softer rhythm. You trail after Sister Jean, who carries an armful of linen cloths for blotting the sweatiest wheels. She hands you one and gestures to a brie that's begun to sag around the edges like an overworked middle manager. "That one's a weeper," she says. "We like her for predicting fog." As you gently pat the rind, you wonder, why cheese? Of all the tools available in the medieval world, why not bones or bowls of water or candles? Well, to be fair, they used those too. But cheese was practical, always on hand, and incredibly sensitive to its environment. Moisture, airflow, pressure, temperature, all of it left its mark on dairy. Cheese was not just food, it was a daily weather report with a waxy rind and a tendency to smell like regret. Modern scientists might say that the microbial activity in cheese reacts visibly to shifts in barometric pressure and ambient humidity. But these nuns didn't have microscopes. They had eyes, noses, and years of quiet observation. Over time, they learned to read the cheese like scripture, or at least like weather poetry written in curd. You sit beside Sister Berta, who shows you the convent's oldest weather record, bound in calfskin, the edges flaking like pastry. Inside are 2 centuries of weather notes. Goat cheese bloomed pink, thunder within the hour, or salt rind stayed dry, sun all day. Some entries even include small drawings, cheese shapes next to little clouds, or suns with sleepy faces. It's part journal, part field guide, part illustrated cheese mood chart. Historians still argue whether these records were meant as actual data or simply devotional reflections on the rhythms of nature. One theory suggests the cheese journal was as much spiritual meditation as meteorological archive. After all, noticing the small changes, the oozing, the stiffening, the fragrant bloom of mold, requires patience, quiet, and care. Very nun-like virtues. Sister Clemence leans in and says she believes the cheese wants to be read. "God speaks in humble things," she whispers, "and sometimes he stinks." You blink, unsure whether to nod or cross yourself. After breakfast, some of the cheese makes a return appearance, slightly more dignified under a crust of warm rye. You're sent to help in the herbarium, but your thoughts keep drifting back to that strange, handwritten scale the nuns refer to when discussing humidity, the Tang Index. It's not scientific, not even alphabetical, just a list of taste descriptions, how cheese feels on the tongue in different conditions. Fuzzy edge, damp roof, tingly root, muddy breeze, dead tongue, sleet for days. According to Sister Agnes, if your tongue goes slightly numb after licking a particular goat cheese, it means cold rain within 24 hours. You try it, hesitantly. The cheese is sharp, lemony, with an aftertaste like grass and regret. Your tongue definitely tingles. Sister Agnes nods solemnly. Missed by dusk. There's a quiet moment where you genuinely begin to believe it all. Not just in a "this is charming and I want to humor them" way, but in a soft, slow realization that there might be something to it. Not magic exactly, but the kind of intuitive science that only develops when people pay exquisite attention to their surroundings over long, quiet years. Even so, not everyone outside the convent is convinced. Sister Leonie tells you of a traveling bishop who once scoffed at the cheese readings. He insisted they were superstitious nonsense and tried to enforce a ban on all dairy divination. The sisters obeyed for about a week. During that time, they hung their linens at the wrong time, ruined 2 bread bakes due to unexpected damp, and missed an entire morning prayer after a surprise hailstorm cracked the chapel's stained glass window. They quietly resumed their cheese consultations. The bishop was never told. That evening, a group of villagers arrives, seeking advice. One of their harvests is due, and they want to know if the weather will hold. Sister Clemens selects a particularly heavy wheel of hard cheese, dry, dense, with a rind like stone, and sets it on a windowsill. She waits 10 minutes, then slices a narrow wedge. The center has shifted texture, slightly spongier than before. "Rain after midnight," she says. They nod and leave, murmuring thanks. You watch them go, wondering how many generations have relied on this curious convent and its dairy profits. Probably more than you'd guess. Even now, with every squelch of cheesecloth and every scribbled weather note, they're recording not just predictions, but centuries of unbroken aromatic memory. Later that night, after Compline, you sneak back to the undercroft. The candles are low, the shelves silent. The air smells of straw and salt and something more ancient. You press your fingers gently into one of the newer wheels. It gives slightly, like the edge of a warm bath. You breathe in. Maybe tomorrow will be clear. The following morning you wake to something unusual. Silence. No wind scratching at the shutters. No rain whispering against the glass. Just the soft sound of your own breath and the distant clink of pottery from the kitchen. You stretch slowly, wondering whether the cheese got it right. Turns out it did. The sky outside is a soft, muted grey, peaceful, dry, and surprisingly still. No sun yet, but no downpour either. The forecast, as it were, is holding steady. You head down to the undercroft, now fully part of the convent's daily rhythm. You barely flinch when the cellar greets you with its usual sharp, grassy tang and the gentle wheeze of ripening mold. Sister Jean is already there, crouched beside a particularly gnarled hunk of aged sheep's cheese that seems to have cracked along one edge during the night. Barometric pressure dropped, she mutters, but not low enough for rain. She squints at it, as though reading lines on a palm. Still, something's coming. There's tension in the air today, not quite fear, but something flickering behind the sisters' quiet steps and tightly folded veils. Sister Mathilde finally whispers it to you while setting out a cloth-wrapped wheel. A group of monks from the nearby abbey is on their way, and they don't come often, only when they're curious or suspicious. By mid-morning the monks arrive, 3 of them, all damp around the hems from walking, all very serious. They say they've heard rumors that villagers claim the nuns can read the skies through cheese. One even brings a parchment citing a bishop's order. No foodstuff may be treated as a divinatory object. The sisters offer them warm broth and bread, no cheese, not yet. You sit near the hearth, listening as the abbess, a regal woman named Mother Heloise, explains in her calm, deliberate voice that they aren't divining per se, they're simply observing divine patterns through God's creations. The monks do not look convinced. One of them, Brother Guillaume, tall, frown permanently etched into his forehead, asks to see the records. Sister Berthe obliges. She lays out the books, the drawings, the parchment filled with squiggly cheese diagrams and poetic mold notes. You expect him to scoff, but he just flips slowly, pauses at a tiny sketch of a Gouda half cracked open like a volcano. "Rain followed this?" he asks. 3 hours later, Sister Berthe replies. He nods, once, says nothing. Another monk, shorter, more skeptical, begins poking at a soft-rinded wheel with the kind of face people usually reserve for questionable stews. "It smells like sin," he says. "Well," Sister Clemence mutters, "so do most of us after matins." You stifle a laugh, but the tension cracks slightly. Even Brother Guillaume's mouth twitches. A single corner, maybe. The real moment, though, comes after midday prayers when one of the sisters, young, wide-eyed Sister Beatrix, suggests they let the monks conduct a reading themselves. "Let them see," she says brightly. "Let the cheese speak." The abbess agrees. The test cheese, a robust wheel known affectionately as Old Mathurin, is set out by the chapel window. Brother Guillaume presses his fingers against the rind, leans in for a cautious sniff. "Sweet, nutty, slight ammonia," he murmurs. "You've done this before," Sister Jeanne says, eyeing him. "A little," he admits. Turns out Brother Guillaume once lived near Roquefort. He knows mold. And maybe, just maybe, he believes it might whisper something. They observe, wait. Watch a sheen of moisture rise across the rind like morning dew. The air gets noticeably heavier. "Storm by night," Sister Clemence says softly. Brother Guillaume nods again. It feels right. Still, there's protocol. The monks leave with polite words and neutral expressions. No promises. But you catch a glimmer of curiosity in Guillaume's eyes as he steps out into the cloister. He lingers at the gate, then glances skyward. Historians still argue whether the convent ever truly faced formal sanctions for their cheese-based predictions. Some suggest the bishopric quietly dropped the issue after one too many accurate forecasts from the convent, especially when the monks' own almanacs got it wrong. Back inside, the sisters gather around the evening hearth, laughing softly over bowls of warm stew and crusty bread. No cheese tonight, it's resting, but the mood is light. Sister Matilda says the cheese felt proud today. Old Mathurin puffed up a bit, she notes, like he knew he was performing. Outside, the clouds gather once again, this time low and purple, roiling at the edges like ink in water. The storm will come, as predicted, probably after nightfall. You help Sister Agnes write the day's entries. Monks arrived. Old Mathurin responded well. Guillaume skeptical but open. Cheese sweating at twilight. The convent lives by these small moments, not loud miracles or dramatic omens, but the soft accumulation of careful observation. Years of watching, sniffing, tasting, recording. A lifetime spent with aging milk as both nourishment and message. You close the book gently and return it to its shelf. Somewhere, deeper in the cellar, another wheel groans faintly. It's your final morning at the convent and something feels different. The air is still, but not in a peaceful way. It's heavy, expectant. Outside the window, the trees don't sway. They brace, not a bird in sight. Even the sisters are quieter than usual, as if the whole building is listening. Down in the undercroft, the cheese has begun to sweat early. Every wheel you pass seems restless, slick under its cloth wrappings. The cellar feels like a room full of people holding their breath. You find the abbess near the back wall, seated beside the oldest of the wheels, one so darkened and cracked that it looks fossilized. "This," she says, not turning her head, "was the first one we ever read." She runs her fingers along the surface like a rosary. It always speaks clearest before storms. You kneel beside her as Sister Jeanne brings a wax tablet. The abbess closes her eyes, touches the wheel gently, then opens them and whispers, "Evening, hard wind," then silence. Her voice catches just slightly on the last word. You notice now that the other sisters have gathered at the edge of the room, watching, waiting. The abbess is not simply reading cheese today. She is passing on something older than the mold-spotted books and the crumbling wheels. She is making her final reading. You help prepare the chapel. Candles are lit. The test cheese is placed on the altar, not as a holy object, but as witness. Sister Clemence brings in her notebook. Sister Léonie sets out the linen cloths with a surprising tenderness. Everyone seems to know what this is. A ritual. A farewell. You carry the abbess's seat yourself, placing it beneath the chapel window, the same one where countless wheels have rested in the light. She takes her place without a word. The cheese sits beside her, medium-aged, soft-rinded, chosen for its sensitivity. Not too mild, not too stubborn. The perfect listener. Outside, the sky bruises, purple at the edges. A thick hush spreads over the courtyard. She places one hand on the wheel, closes her eyes, and simply breathes. The room waits. After a long pause, she opens her eyes and speaks softly. The rain will begin when the chapel bell rings once. There will be wind for an hour, then calm. A single nod from Sister Agnes. She writes it down without hesitation. Historians still debate whether this particular reading was dramatized in later retellings. Some say the abbess's words were interpreted posthumously to fit what happened. But others, especially those who've lived near the convent for generations, believe it exactly as it occurred. Because just after the final bell rang, one clear, resonant note, the rain began. A soft patter at first, then harder, then all at once, like heaven exhaling. You hear it in the rafters, in the cracks of the stone walls, in the sighs of the nuns. But just as the abbess said, it doesn't last. The wind blows through in one strong sweep, pushing shutters open and bending the trees. Then, stillness. You stay beside the abbess as the others close windows and mop puddles. Her face is peaceful, not triumphant, not relieved, just calm. She pats your hand and murmurs, "It's always been about listening." And that's the truth of it, really. Not magic, not mystery, just listening, watching, waiting, the practice of living slowly, noticing the cheese swell and sigh and bloom in its quiet rhythms. In a world of chaos, famine, plague, fire, the sisters found something they could trust, something that reacted predictably, even if it occasionally lied. You spend your last hour at the convent helping Sister Matilda oil the shelves. She hums softly as she works, the tune lilting between sacred and silly. Every so often she glances at a cheese and smiles, as if remembering an old friend. Before you leave, she hands you a small wrapped parcel. "A young wheel," she says, "might speak to you someday." You carry it carefully as you walk back through the cloister. The rain has stopped. The sky is pale again. Everything smells clean. You don't look back until the convent bell tolls once more, this time for vespers. You imagine the sisters gathering in the dark stone chapel, the echo of their voices layered with the faint scent of ripening cheese. You walk on, heart strangely full, still cradling the warm, fragrant wheel in your hands. And now the convent fades behind you, stone walls softening into fog, candlelight blinking out one flame at a time. You walk slower now, each step lighter. The wheel of cheese in your hand still warm, still silent, but not heavy. It seems to hum a little, or maybe that's just the air around you, settling, easing, exhaling. The fields are quiet. No carts, no chatter. Just the faint sound of water trickling from a gutter and the sleepy creak of tree branches stretching after the storm. You pause for a moment under a low-hanging willow, letting the calm roll over you. Your breath slows. Your shoulders drop. The last edge of tension slips away like a drip of wax down the side of a candle. The sisters are back in their cells by now, curled under wool blankets, the night wrapping around them like a second cloak. Somewhere in the undercroft, a cheese shifts, sighs, and begins the slow work of blooming toward tomorrow's forecast. You don't need to rush. The wind has quieted, the sky has cleared, and there's nothing more to know tonight. Close your eyes wherever you are. Let the sounds drift. Let the coolness settle.